when we saw the impact it had to this organization and some of the individuals, and when they were told, this is your place, this is your home, and they fall to their knees and they start bawling, or they come up to you and they give you the biggest hug that you're not expecting. That's where the heart started shifting to, focusing our efforts toward, okay, how can we grow this business for a greater good, for a greater impact, to impact this community, to some of these needs.
Welcome to the Threefold Real Estate Investing Podcast. This is the podcast where you'll not only learn how you can achieve massive success in multifamily real estate investing, but also how you can simultaneously pursue great relationships with your family and a better walk with God. You can achieve financial freedom through real estate investing without sacrificing the relationships that mean the most to you. Now, here's your host, Lee Yoder.
Welcome back, Threefold listeners. I hope you're having a great week. We've got another great guest today. Todd Bowen is joining us today from up in that state up north. So a little bit about Todd, and then we'll bring him in. He and his wife, Katie, been married 14 years, 2 sons, founded Trinity Investment Group, a real estate company, in 2017 as a way to diversify their retirement investments. Since then, it's turned into a full-time passion and mission. They currently own 20 residential units in West Michigan. Majority of these are leased to local nonprofit organizations that provide housing for victims of human trafficking, domestic abuse, substance abuse, recovery, reentry, and people suffering with homelessness and mental health. I can't wait to get into that. I've already had a chance to talk to Todd about that. Really excited to hear more about this. But Todd and his wife recently partnered on a 48-unit complex in Ankeny, Iowa, and they just hope to use the blessings God has given them to bless others and make a positive impact on the kingdom. Love all that. Todd, thanks so much for joining us today, man. I'm really excited to get into your story.
Thank you, Lee. I appreciate the introduction, and I'm honored to be here.
Let's go all the way back. Tell us, as I read, you started in 2017 as a way to diversify your retirement investments. Just tell us a little bit about, where you and Katie were at the time, just with your life and kind of what the thinking was. How did you even get interested in real estate in the first place? Kind of just give us your backstory a little bit as far as real estate goes.
Yeah, no problem. It's a pretty easy story to tell. At the time, 2017, my wife and I were both working full-time jobs.
Sure.
And at that time, let's see, our kids were born in 2010 and 2013.
Okay.
And, they were getting up to that school age. And, retirement for most people, I think, is kind of an afterthought or just not about enough. And I guess I've always been a planner and, looking into that, future plan in that big, golden gate of retirement.
Yeah.
I started wondering, what are we doing with that besides maximizing our 401ks through work?
Yep.
And I was keeping track of that and, watching that grow slowly. But at the end of the day, we didn't have any control over that. I've always loved real estate. Confirmation bias told me when I started looking online and started reading, even some of the mindset books, kind of always pointed to real estate and, how much of a, blessing that can be as far as wealth, how you can help other individuals. And so we pursued real estate that way, just learning at first. Probably the year of 2016 was the learning year.
Okay.
And
yeah.
2017 is when we started taking some action.
Okay. Yeah. You make a good point, Todd. I think for most people, especially in your 20s and then still in your 30s and probably still in your 40s and some people even in your 50s, you're really just not thinking that much about retirement. You've got enough to think about, right? And it's like, hey, it's just so far away, so I'll just put it in and kind of, everybody knows that the game plan, you just work, you make as much money as you can, you try not to spend all of it. And, you just
hope there's enough at the end.
Keep contributing to the 401k and hope there's enough at the end. Exactly right. And because you're more of a planner, your mind started thinking ahead a little bit more than most. And like, well, wait a second, is this really going to work? And maybe is this all there is? Is this the only route? And I really wish more people, we're more of a planner, and I can't say that I was. I kind of got into it a different way, but yeah, I just really wish Todd, more people just really thought through that. Like, is this really the best way to do it? Is it the only way to do it? So you start seeing this, but how do you get started? I mean, how do you jump in? You decide real estate's a good place, but how can somebody get started? How did you do it?
So it's kind of funny. I called up our financial advisor where we were sending our money and who was managing our money. If you call it management, it was tough to know what exactly he was doing with it, but love him to death. And he's a brother in faith. And I called him up and I asked him what he thought of real estate investing as a diversification for retirement. I mean, that's exactly what we're talking about.
Yep.
And to my surprise, he said, I love real estate, Todd. I have 17 houses and they're like little ATM machines.
Wow.
And I was a little taken back because, he's a financial advisor and he's putting money into the market and he's watching that and managing that. And that's his active day-to-day career.
Yep.
And he was doing on the side what I had hoped to do myself.
Yeah.
And so through that conversation, he gave me the info to the guy that helped him buy those houses.
Okay.
And I reached out to Doug, and turns out Doug is a great friend now. 5 years later, we still talk almost every day, if not weekly. He is an investor with several properties.
Yeah.
He is a licensed builder and he is a real estate agent. So he has
a good guy to know.
A good guy to know. I call it the trifecta. We look at a house, he can let us in, he can walk around, he can point out all the bad things about the house.
Yep.
And I like to say the initial visit for us is like a home inspection and gives us a lot of confidence going in. And then on the back end, he can tell me right on the spot, this is going to cost you $5,000. This is going to cost you $20,000. You're going to hate that. Those kind of things that what you're getting into. So whether to walk right now, or you can put those numbers in your deal analyzer and see if it makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh, and I didn't make it easy for him. We looked at 70, 80, maybe 90 places.
Wow.
In 2017. And it was just that, paralysis of analysis or that fear to jump in. And Doug's a great guy. He would always, encourage me, teach me, but he was like, Todd, are you the kind of guy that sits by the edge of the pool and puts your toes in the water? Are you the kind of guy like me that gets a running start and does a cannonball in the deep end? And of course, that is an analogy to real estate. Are you going to jump into this investing and start now? Or are you going to think about it forever and analyze it to death? Yep. And so we found a duplex. That was our first property in 2017.
That's great. You're blessed, Todd, to have in my opinion, a good financial planner, because I thought what you were going to say is he was going to say, man, I don't know anything about real estate. If you want to get into real estate, you got to talk to somebody else, because here's what I do. So man, that's awesome. Kudos.
Conflict of interest for him.
Yeah, kind of is it, right? I mean, you're saying, a lot of times you'd be saying, hey, I'd like to take some money away from you. So take away from your fees and put it here. But it's awesome. He turned you on to the right guy. And a lot of times that's what networking does, is lead you to the right people. And it's usually that guy that's an investor, kind of investor first, and thinks that way, but he's also a realtor and likes to sell people houses, investment properties. I know a couple guys like that, and that's who I send everybody to. Actually the guy in Dayton, his name's Todd, and everybody that comes, I'm like, I got to introduce you to Todd, because he's going to be the guy that gets you started. And he's really good in that small, like single families, but like the small multis, he can find those all day long. He's in the markets. Like, you got to meet that guy. So you got him with the right guy. You kind of got going. So you're up to 20 units. Kind of bring us up to speed, Todd. That first duplex, maybe a little bit how that went, and then how did you scale to 20 units?
Yeah, so we're getting to the meat now. Bought that duplex and we inherited tenants. I was kind of going for that at the time because I was still working. And in my eyes, if I bought a place that was already had tenants, then that would be instant cash flow.
Sure.
And I'm worried about making that payment and, making this thing cash flow. So yeah, we bought that. We inherited those tenants, and it was actually at the closing table, from all my reading and negotiating, I thought I was pretty smart. And I asked the seller if she had anything else for sale. And Doug kind of looked at me like, "What are you doing, kid?" And she said, "Well, I'll give you a list of properties I might sell."
Wow.
And so she wrote down, just scribbled down on a piece of paper, a list of 5 other properties that she'd be willing to sell. And Doug and I left closing and went and drove by those properties. And sure enough, one of them was a 3-unit that was in pretty bad disrepair. But once we were able to take a look at it with my inspector, agent, investor,
yeah,
we made an offer on that 1 month later.
Wow, that's awesome.
Went from 0 to 5 units in about 30 days, from the time I first closed on that second one. We inherited tenants there, and turns out we had 2 evictions at the 3-unit. We had people not paying, people moving out, and I'm like, wow, what did I get myself into? Sitting on 5 units, thinking I'm a real estate investor, and still not really knowing what's going on. So
yeah, that's always the learning experience. And I just always, in our underwriting, and I would always caution anyone and suggest to people to underwrite for much higher vacancy in year 1, because likely, you're going to be doing things differently than the previous owner. And especially if you really want to come in and you want to run it like a business and you want to run a tight ship, it's not necessarily going to be true, but I think you should just assume that the seller did not run it that way, because a lot of times that's the case. So when you start making people pay on time, you may find that that's not what they're used to, and so they don't want to do that. And when
they haven't heard of the no pay, no stay policy.
Yeah, right. And when you say, "Hey, there's a late fee," because you're late, they're not used to that, so they're not, and they're not going to stick around. And in the long run, you don't want them to. You don't want those kind of residents that aren't going to pay and aren't going to respect your place and aren't going to allow you to run it like a business. So they're going to have to go. But yeah, it makes it for a tough first year. So I'm assuming you got that ironed out, got new residents in that were better, and which allowed you to kind of keep going.
Yeah, it was at that time that Katie and I decided it was time to have someone else manage those properties, because we both had full-time jobs. I was a project manager for an environmental engineering company, and, it was a lot of hours. It was a lot of responsibility, and it was, quite a bit of travel, or at least windshield time, day trips. And my wife is a sales rep, so she's on the road, and we just didn't have the time. And then we had 2 boys to manage these. And that's the last thing I wanted to do on the weekends, was to go up and deal with this stuff. We hired a property management company. They got things straightened out. They started vetting new tenants and getting this thing kind of on its feet, so it would be sustainable. That was year 1. Year 2, we kind of jumped to the summer of 2018, and I found this 5-unit building on the market, and it was completely vacant. And went and looked at it. And they were small units. They needed some cosmetic rehab. We made an offer, and we bought that I bought that 5-unit building for $75,000.
Wow. That's my goodness.
Yeah. 2018. Today it's probably worth $240 to $260. Buying that vacant, we bought a project.
How much help was your property management with that project, Todd?
It was all about the same time that I was listening to other podcasts, and I heard about a guy on a podcast that was renting his properties to nonprofit organizations.
Gotcha. Okay, I was gonna. Yeah, that was definitely one of my questions: is how you got turned on to that. Let's get into that a little bit then.
Yeah. And so that was the time. Kind of heard that podcast. Had just closed on this building, totally vacant.
Right.
And had to find private money to help purchase the building. We didn't know what we were going to do with it. That was the turning point to start reaching out to our local nonprofits. And I hadn't heard of any of them. I hadn't talked to them, didn't know them, but I just started getting on the phone as soon as we had closed on that building. I don't know, it was probably a 3-month process, maybe 4, and wasn't getting any traction, wasn't getting past the gatekeeper. And finally I did, and pitched them the idea of leasing this entire 5-unit building to them for their housing program, give them authority to move in whoever they wanted to that was in their program, move them out. Because it's pretty transient by nature. The organization works with domestically abused women and children.
Wow, that's awesome.
It took a while, but I even had to bring my wife in at one point because she's a salesperson and
saleswoman. Yeah.
Yeah. And she nailed it, and they agreed to rent that building for a 2-year lease period. And, the weight, let me tell you, was lifted off our shoulders.
Wow, I can't imagine. Yeah.
Now we had this building that we had $100,000 into, that we borrowed the money to buy and to rehab. We just, leased this building out for, I don't know, I think at the time it was $3,000 or $3,200 a month for 2 years.
Yeah.
With an organization. And so you start running the numbers, and you're thinking, okay, these returns are pretty good. Let's continue this. This organization called back a month later and said, hey, it's going well in this 5-unit. Do you have anything else? And sure enough, that first duplex we bought had just become vacant. And so we were in there doing work, sprucing it up. We showed it to them, and they said, we'll take it. And they did the same thing. They signed a 2-year lease for that duplex, both units.
Man, how cool, Todd. So,
oh man,
that's awesome. I mean, it's an overused term to say, a win-win, but I really do think we see it so much in real estate. And I love getting in this where you can do things right. You can do right by people and do good things and make money at it. I mean, and do well for yourself and your investors. Man, it's just what I love about it. And this is an even better example of that. So you heard it on a podcast and was like, okay, cool. That's interesting. I mean, I can totally see why you're like, man, I could go from 0 for 5 to 5 for 5 in a hurry. So that totally makes sense. But I'm sure there were some negatives in your mind at least. But what was kind of the inspiration behind that, Todd? What made you, and then you stuck with it for 3 to 4 months or whatever of trying to get this done. Tell us a little about your inspiration behind, pursuing this strategy.
Yeah, it's a great question, because it was about that time I had begun having a shift of heart. Up to this point, it was all about me. And, this is my side hustle. This is going to make me wealthy. This is going to allow me to get out of my job, financial freedom, time freedom, all that stuff. And, that stuff's not bad.
Sure.
But that's where the focus was, on myself. When we saw the impact it had to this organization and some of the individuals, and when they were told, this is your place, this is your home, and, they fall to their knees and they start bawling, or they come up to you and they give you the biggest hug that you're not expecting. We had some of that. I have goosebumps right now. And that's where the heart started shifting to, okay, if you want to hear God laugh, tell him your plans. I was telling him, hey, this is what I'm going to do. He softened my heart to say, this is my plan for you. You will now do this for me.
Yeah. For others. Yeah.
Others.
I'll work through you. Yeah.
The tide shifted, and we started, focusing our efforts toward, okay, how can we grow this business for a greater good, for a greater impact, to impact this community, to some of these needs? Because that's when we started to think about reaching out to other organizations and seeing if we could meet some of their needs. And to skip ahead, we currently work with 5.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah.
And we're talking to 2 more, the kind of talks like, hey, do you want to go this route? Do you like this model? We're actually looking for a house for one of them, that kind of talk. So
that's cool.
It's really grown into helping more people and using real estate as a tool for a win-win situation.
Sure.
I agree with you. It is cliche. That's what we want to make, right?
Yeah.
It's, if there's someone that has a problem with profit, my argument to that is there's nothing wrong with profit. It's what you do with the profit that kind of shows where your heart is. And I would tell them that what we do with our profit is go help more organizations or house more people. We don't gouge, but we do have to run this like a business because we are a nonprofit. I've never drew any owner salary from the business so far. We shifted our lifestyle to live off my wife's income.
Wow.
I was able to leave my W-2 job.
Yeah.
And we just reinvest all the profits. And that's kind of, where we feel led to do right now.
Man, that's neat. And what I love about it, Todd, as so often happens, like you said, you had this plan for yourself and kind of told God your plans, and God said, well, I've got this other plan. But the neat thing about it is like, it's still involved your plan. I mean, you still, you quit, you're still doing this full time. So it's like, I've actually got something so much bigger. Like it is going to, Todd, it's great. I love your heart. And you are going to, I do want to bless you in this as well. So like, you are going to get to go do this full time, but I've got so much more planned. It's not going to just be about you. It is like, it's going to involve you too. And it's going to be great. And I think, you guys are building a nice portfolio here. And like, I think you and Katie are definitely going to be blessed by it. And I probably one day financially, as you're pouring back into it now, but also like you're blessing so many other people. And so God is using you as this vessel to bless so many people. So it's awesome. It's a great thing. I imagine there's people, hearing this and thinking, wow, like, man, maybe I should look into this. I mean, I would love to bless people like this. Let's get into the nitty gritty of it a little bit, Todd. I mean, what are some of the negatives? I mean, I can imagine spending 3 to 4 months trying to get someone to say yes to what seems like a no brainer for them is to hey, take a 5-unit right here. And we've got it, ready to go. And it looks great and, great home and you guys can lease the whole thing out. But you're kind of dealing with the bureaucracy, government type stuff. I mean, that's kind of my first thought, but what are some of the negatives, if any? And is this something that you would suggest others look into, or would you say, hey, you've really got to have a heart for it because it's very difficult?
That's a tougher question to answer. Because they're pretty soft negatives, I would say. Okay. So working with nonprofits, funding is always an issue. Not all organizations, we found out, are funded well enough on an annual basis to sign up for something like this or to commit to a lease. Okay. Some of them, they run so lean and they depend on grant funding that may or may not show up. They depend on donor funding, fundraising. That was an issue up front, talking with some of them. They just, flat out said, we love what you're doing. It's a great idea. If we could commit to that, then it might be possible.
Gotcha.
So
makes sense.
That was a negative. Outside of that, Lee, it's hard for me to think of, something negative. We have some of the normal, tenant issues that we, have to address, where if they, break something or trash the place, then we have to have a conversation with the nonprofit. We have to go back to the lease and just kind of work through, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to address this situation? And that's worked out pretty well. It's I would say it's worked out better than leasing to someone that's profit. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So finding one where this model works may be a challenge, but once you do, it's really a pretty good model.
We may be coming up on another potential. It's not an issue, but it's just the rent amount. Most of these programs use the fair market rental rate that HUD publishes.
Okay.
And the housing and urban development. And at the time we first started doing this, that was market rates or even slightly above.
Okay.
Now I'm seeing with rent growth and inflation and appreciation that market rates are starting to surpass the HUD rates. My philosophy on that is that I would rather have a consistent rent payment that might be under market than have top dollar, but have vacancies.
Yeah. I mean, you're essentially for 2 years, you are 100% occupied.
Yes.
Economically, whether physically you are or not. Yeah.
Correct.
I mean, that's really, that can make up for a lot of loss in, a lot of rent premium loss. Right. You can make up for a lot of that in the occupancy. For the properties that are, leased out to a nonprofit, are you still using property management on those properties? And how does that work? I mean, because I would imagine you shouldn't pay as much because they're not having to do as much. I just, first thought. So tell me a little bit about that, about property management.
That's a great question. The units we have with the nonprofits, I manage them myself.
Okay. Gotcha.
And I was unsure about that based on how the first few went. After a month or two of working with an organization, you kind of come to realize that you're not chasing that rent. It's right. Typically shows up and you're like, wow, okay, this is a good thing. And then there were some issues we had to work through. Not issues, more processes. If there was a maintenance concern, I previously would get a call or a text from the organization. I would call or text my handyman, and I would be the middleman. And one day I think I read The One Thing by Gary Keller, and that was my one thing, that if that went away, being the middleman, then everything else would seem amazing.
Yeah.
It was pretty easy to say, hey, organization, if you could please just contact my handyman directly, that would be wonderful. And then I'll be out of the mix. You guys can coordinate timing, coordinate what it is.
Yep.
And just get it done.
This is the second time, Todd, where like you just decided to ask the question, getting your start in real estate. Well, getting your second property and kind of springboarding you forward was just asking the seller if they had anything else to sell, where most people just wouldn't ask that because, I don't know, it's embarrassing. It doesn't seem right, whatever. And then
imposter syndrome.
Absolutely. And then, just asking, the nonprofit, the company, your kind of client in a way, hey, could you do something differently? And, because most people wouldn't do that. I feel bad doing that. It's not that bad. I'll just keep doing things the way I'm doing it or whatever. And just asking, like, the answer is yes. Again, great lesson there. Just to ask.
It was a win-win-win situation.
Oh my goodness!
Like, everyone was happier because it was less
for sure
coordination. So,
it's people don't like change and they don't like to ruffle feathers, and so sometimes it's hard. But man, you're so glad when you do. Todd, I know your faith is important to you. I love how you feel like God kind of changed your heart and showed you something bigger and how He could use you. And yet, I love though that you still got to quit your job. You still got to do this full time. You're still getting to pursue your passion, but God had even bigger plans for that. One question I would have is like, what do you want your kids to learn from your unique experience and journey in real estate investing?
Great question, man. First of all, I want them to learn to love real estate.
There you go. Yeah.
Because right now, what are they, 8 and 11? I kind of get the eye roll when I talk about real estate. I'm like, come on, boys.
Yeah.
But no, in all seriousness, what I want them to kind of recognize is that the choices that we've made, and particularly choosing real estate, has allowed us, Katie and I, way more time with them than I ever had with a W-2 job. And I mean, it's the simple things. I get to take them to school now. I get to pick them up.
Right.
I get to coach Little League, and the boys are into motocross. And so, that's a sport where you're kind of on the road. It might be during the week, it might be on the weekend. And, I couldn't do that before when I had a job. So the biggest takeaway for them is, just knowing that dad can spend time with them.
I love it. Yeah.
This. And, going back to the goals, that was one of my very big goals was, the time freedom to raise our kids while they're 8 and 11 and they're growing up.
Yeah. So fast. Yep.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah. Real estate can offer such freedom. I mean, even, especially when you're active, but even as a passive investor, I mean, it can just do a lot for improving your freedom because it can pay you today. You can get cash flow today, which can just increase people's freedom. And when you have a family, that's so important. That time freedom is so important when you've got kids and you got that family. So that's awesome, man. A couple questions I ask all my guests. One would be, I don't think you've mentioned anything yet, books. Any book that helped you kind of get started or has been really meaningful to you in your real estate investing journey?
There's so many that I should send you a list for the show notes.
Yeah.
A couple that
you mentioned the one thing, I guess, already. I love that book.
Yeah.
Kind of more of a business, like self-improvement book.
Yeah. And those tend to strike me a little stronger. The other one is How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yep.
Carnegie. Yep. That's a must read for everyone.
For sure.
The Cash Flow Quadrant early on by Robert Kiyosaki was dynamite.
What would you say is the key ingredient to be a successful real estate investor? Someone's thinking they want to get started. What do you think one thing it definitely takes to be successful at real estate investing?
I think it's the mindset. And can you overcome the fear that false evidence appearing real? Can you overcome that to take action? So there's kind of a stepping stone right there.
Sure.
Can you get to action by changing your mindset and overcoming fear?
Let's flip that question on its head a little bit. What's a key ingredient then to, while you're having success in real estate investing, maintaining your priorities, prioritizing your faith, following Christ, and prioritizing your wife and your kids?
Oh man, I think starting every day in the Word.
Yeah.
And in prayer. I think also to go along with that is controlling your day, your time, and as opposed to letting it control you.
Sure. Yep.
And honestly, this might be a little surprising, but communication, like I mentioned earlier, I talk to my boys about real estate and the business all the time. And I think there's a lot of valuable lessons there that they can learn, not only about business and lifestyle, but our impact and our faithfulness too.
Yeah, right. Connecting everything. I love that. My wife's big on that. She's so, I feel like wise in that, to say, hey, your job, whatever it is, but especially since we're fortunate enough to kind of do this real estate thing and do the entrepreneurial thing, it shouldn't be something separate, something that separates me and my wife, or something that separates me and the kids. It could be something we're doing together. At least they know about and we talk about, and we're doing it together. We do it as a team. It could be something that brings you kind of together, that you grow in together, versus, again, something that separates you. Now, not every job can be like that as much, but maybe the more you talk about it with your kids, it's something that unites you. And wait, this has been really great, Todd. I love what you're doing. I frankly, I guess I'm a little bit embarrassed. I have not thought that much about it, but I love the concept. I obviously love, the way you're able to be a vessel for God and bring His kingdom here on earth by serving others in that way. So thank you so much for explaining that to us and bringing that to light, so that some of us can maybe, pursue that opportunity as well. And before I let you go, Todd, I always like to ask, how might we, my listeners and I, be praying for you, maybe you, your family, your business in the coming weeks?
Great question, Lee. I appreciate that.
Sure.
45 minutes before we jumped on the call today, we made an offer on another property. That
good timing.
For an organization that works with reentry and recovery individuals. Nice. This particular home would be a group home, and it's a very competitive market right now. Doug actually told me there was 6 or 8 offers that were on the table. Offers were due today. So we submitted, and if you guys and your friends and family would want to pray for that, that would be very much appreciated.
Absolutely. Yeah, man. Again, great. Just love that we could pray for you and your family, that, this could be something that provides for you guys, but then obviously you're going to provide this group home for others. Love that we get to pray for both of those. Todd, that's awesome.
I appreciate that, Lee.
Good stuff, man. Wade, thanks again for joining. We'll send people over to you.
Okay.
And good luck to you, man. I hope you close on that one. Hope you close on a bunch more.
Sounds good. Thanks, Lee.
Take care, Todd. Yep.
Okay.
Bye now.
All right.
Thank you for joining us for another great episode. I hope you'll take action on what you've learned today. If you enjoyed today's show, please consider leaving Lee a 5-star rating and review. And check him out on threefoldrei.com. Until next time, 1 Timothy 6:17.